Welcome. The theme for today's Yin yoga practice is the planet Mars. It's what I call a double flower sequence of Yin postures. So the first flower will be an asymmetrical posture called banana pose with frog pose, a symmetrical posture placed in between the banana poses, which are the petals of the first flower. The second sequence of Yin postures will be the asymmetrical postures half saddle with the symmetrical posture caterpillar pose in between the two sides of half saddle pose. And we'll end with heart opening on a blanket or a block. So useful props, again, any yoga practice, you can either use no props or a lot of props. I always suggest get some soft padding, some blankets, and some pillows. If you have formal yoga props like blocks and a bolster, those could be handy during practice as well. So decide what your intention for practice is, and of course during practice I will be talking a little bit about one of our neighboring planets in the solar system. So to start practice, it's nice to just find some inner ground and some stability. So this is done by finding an accessible seat, something that you can stay in, something that you can easily breathe in for a while. And you can take your time with this. You can be sitting cross-legged like I am. If you're trying to sit cross-legged and you find that a little bit of height is helpful, I'm sitting up on a blanket. You can even sit up on a block or a bolster if you wish, or find a different seat that works for you. Find that stability, find that rootedness between you and what you're sitting on, and then grow your spine to a nice neutral position. We'll do a little bit of breathing for the warm-up, and we'll do a little bit of other activities here. But we want the front of the torso, the sides of the torso, and the back of the torso to be open so that our lungs are free to fill with air as we breathe here. And once you've done all that, maybe you got to roll your shoulders back. Maybe you got to tuck your chin a little bit. Maybe you have to soften all the tension in your face and in your jaw and around your eyes. And then just notice the intake of breath and the outtake of breath, the inhales and the exhales. And notice just how amazing this cycling is. And if you've ever had medical difficulties with breathing before, then you know how amazing it is to be free of difficulty breathing. That's why each cycle of breath is a tiny miracle. It's a tiny cycle of this beautiful dance between yin and yang, the inhale, the yang breath, and the exhale, the yin breath. You can continue this and just to continue to revisit why you're practicing, revisit your attention as to how you're feeling and the immediate environment around you, the sounds, the smells, the temperature, the sensations here. And that means the internal ones. And that also means your internal mental and emotional sensations, the train, the busyness, the half a dozen other metaphors I can think of to describe all that mental processing that's going on in our brains here. But we'll go through a few rounds of what I call 3-part breathing if you want to follow along. So when you get done with your next exhale out a little bit more and maybe even engage your muscles slightly to pull your belly button slightly in. And then when you inhale and visualize yourself just filling up the bottom third of your torso, so your low abdomen. And then continue to inhale and fill up the middle third of your abdomen, your waist and your low ribs. And then inhale and fill up your upper ribs all the way up to the top of your collarbones. So you're completely full, and then exhale and soften that upper third. Exhale and release release that middle third, the waist, and exhale, release the low abdomen, and then inhale again and fill up the first third, the second third, and the third third. Exhale, release the top third. Exhale, release the next third. Exhale, release the bottom third. And continue this for a couple more cycles of breath at your own pace. And you might have to go much more quickly than how I was cueing it. And even though we're visualizing these three parts of breath, what we're actually doing is creating one giant wave of breath. What we're actually doing is paying attention to our breath. And what we're actually doing is consciously slowing down the breath, because we have to slow down the breath to take into account all this mental processing of filling up the entire torso. Now, this isn't meant to be strainful, so if you are feeling strain, allow yourself to back off to a point where you could maybe maintain this for an hour if you had to. Because if you're saying to yourself, oh, I can't even maintain this for a couple more breaths, that's too much. That's too much. Go and give yourself permission to back off. Yin is a very allowing practice. And it's hard to accept and allow ourselves to do something if it's creating pain. Bring your breath back to a normal, natural breath. You can drop the three-part breathing if you were doing that here. And then from here, you can either stay with the cross-legged seat we'll do a little bit of a short shoulder warm-up, but if this is an accessible seat for you to sit in, you can change your seat and sit back on, with knees together, back on your heels. Maybe for some of us who can't quite do that, if you sit up on a block, maybe you can do that. Or, for some of you who want even a little bit more intensity in the legs and the hips and the feet, you can tuck your feet under and then sit back with your feet tucked so that your toes and the bottoms of your feet get a stretch. This can be pretty intense for most of us, so once the intensity is enough, you can undo the feet. Make sure you get all the toes in on this, so you might have to get the peaky toe to get there here. Now again, if this was enough, you can undo the feet, go back to a more accessible seat. Otherwise, we'll include some eagle arms here. So extend your arms out to either side, shoulder height, and then sweep your arms across each other. Right arm underneath the left. See if you can cross above the elbows, and then bend at the elbows. Either bring your hands to your shoulders or continue to wrap your forearms. See if you can catch your fingers, or maybe you can make the eagle arm prayer hands here. It doesn't really matter. You're just going into where you stop. And then move your elbows forward and up until you're stuck. That might be a very subtle movement here. Keep your spine nice and neutral. So torso is nice and long. You might have to slightly tone through your core to do this. And stay here long enough to notice all the stuckness, all the intensity here. There's a lot going on here. So this might be pretty intense. You can, if you're wanting a final challenge, you can add some neck rolling. So you tuck your chin and begin to roll your neck over to the right and back and around. Maybe make 2 slow circles here. And notice if there's any places where your neck is feeling strained. So this gets intense fast here. And then bring your head back up. Release the eagle arms here. Maybe shake the arms out. We do the other side of eagle arms. If your feet are done, please undo your feet here. Otherwise, arms come back out. This time, the left arm sweeps underneath the right arm. Make your version of eagle arms this time. And then elbows go out and up. Torso is long here. You can just stay here with a nice neutral neck, but if you like the neck rolling, tuck your head and roll your neck the other way, very slowly, for maybe 1 or 2 cycles. Let's just see how this feels. And then bring your head up. You can release the eagle arms, you can shake your arms out. If your feet are still tucked, maybe come back all on hands and knees, and then just kind of very gently tap the tops of your feet on the ground to just work out the stagnation. That was a little bit of yin for the feet there. Now we'll go into the first yin posture proper. So this is the first part of the first flower. This is banana pose. This is the first long held posture. So you can make your way onto your back. Legs extended out long here. So start kind of in a nice neutral position where everything's lined up here. You want your hips to be level and flat on the floor. And that's because we're going into a lateral bend here. A full body lateral bend, that's what banana pose is. So start walking and moving your extended legs over to the right, just as far as they go until they're stuck. And so this will be unique to you. So wherever they go here. And then start inching your torso. You might have to use your arms here. Maybe your head. Over to the same side, so to the right. So we're forming this crescent moon, this bent shape, this banana shape here. That's why this is called banana pose. Now you're trying to keep that left hip low onto the ground. If you have a soft weight like a sandbag, you can place it on that left hip to encourage that left hip not to fold up, but to stay low so that you can feel the traction of this posture running somewhere along the left side. So we're opening up through the left side by moving everything to the right here. This can't be painful. We're just trying to find our stopping point. So this is the process of yin. Once you've found the stopping points, you can do some experimentation here. So experiment with your head and your neck to find a comfortable position here. Experiment with your arms. They can just be here down at the sides, can be out wide, they can be up overhead. You can gently pull on the left arm to kind of stretch the left arm and shoulder up and get more of sensation running down through this left side. You can experiment with crossing your legs here. So this is, banana pose can be a subtle pose. So you might want to kind of like work with it. And we'll stay here for a few minutes. So I'll spend this time reminding you of the qualities of a yin practice. So yin practice has the qualities of acceptance and allowance and softness. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find a supported position where we can relax the muscle engagement so that the traction, and the technical term is stress, but this is not stress, bad stress, this is just mechanical stress, goes into joint capsules, ligaments, fascia, even bones to a certain extent, which is collectively known as yin tissue. That's why physically this is known as a yin practice. It's also mentally known as a yin practice because these long held postures can be seen as a mini meditation session here. Since we're here for several minutes and we'll be here for a little over 3 minutes in this banana pose. If this is too achy or painful, back yourself off. If you're not feeling anything at all and you want to feel something, then give yourself permission to move more deeply into the posture. Maybe move your feet over some more, your torso here. Maybe you need a pillow underneath your head. Find the shape that works for you here. So the 3 principles of yin, the 3 mechanics are, 1 is finding your edge. Pain, trauma, injury, not your edge. So if you ever drive yourself so deeply into a posture that you're experiencing those things, know that you're not practicing yoga anymore. You're practicing self-jujitsu. So back yourself off to where you're still maybe feeling some pressure, but you know you're not harming yourself. So that's the exploration of the edge here. Maybe you want to feel something so that you know you have traction placed in your body somewhere, and that can be uncomfortable, but uncomfortable is different than pain. Here. 2nd principle is called stillness. Once you've found that edge, it can take a lifetime to master finding the edge. Then you try to stay So we enter the fourth dimension of the practice, and that's time. And in order to experience time, we need to have the patience to stay and to be still. Some yoga techniques are useful at this, like watching your breath, noticing those places where your muscles want to engage, and wondering if you can actually release the muscle fiber. So that's good places to have mental focus here. So just a couple more breaths here on this side of banana. I'll talk a little bit about Yin principles. Yang principles are more active principles, and we often explore the contrasting attributes. And indeed, my weird theme for class, which is the planet Mars, actually goes along these lines of this dance between yin and yang, because we give the planet Mars these yang, very yang attributes, which are the opposite of yin. And yet, does Mars really deserve those attributes? We can start to come out of banana pose. So slowly make your way back to your center line, slowly, so yet you can feel the fact that, ooh, you had done a lateral bend for a few minutes here. You can make little motions to work out the kinks. You can lie in the stillness. My favorite counter pose after a long held banana pose is a slight forward bend, and I do that by just bending my knees and hugging them into my chest here. You can do that slowly. You can rock your knees from side to side. Like I said, this is a flowering sequence, so instead of doing the other side of banana right away, I'm going to do a symmetrical posture. And the symmetrical posture in between the two sides of banana will be frog pose. So you can start out with a gentler version of frog pose, which I call baby frog. Baby frog is essentially wide-legged child's pose. Now you might have noticed that I've got two mats here and crossed each other, and that's just because I'm going to demonstrate frog from this angle, and my legs might go wider than the mat, and I want some soft padding under my knees. So if you don't have a couple mats, or if you want extra padding, then by all means grab a blanket or maybe even some pillows and spread it out onto the floor so that you have something soft under the pressure points that get generated in this posture. And if you don't know what frog is, you're going to see it here in a minute. If you have some pillows or a yoga bolster, maybe have those handy here. And then you'll come to hands and knees. And notice I'm strategically placing my knees, my shins, my ankles on the padding, because that's where the pressure is generated here. We'll start off in what I call baby frog, which is wide-legged child's pose. Maybe my feet move closer together, and I move my knees apart, just as far as they go. And then maybe I sit back towards my heels until my hips stop. Doesn't matter where they stop. It's just when they stop, that's as far as they go. And then lower my torso forward. You can extend your arms forward. Maybe your torso doesn't make it down to the ground. Maybe you would like something underneath your torso. So this is where the pillows, or in this case, I'm just grabbing my handy dandy yoga bolster, placing it underneath my torso. So this is baby frog. And if this is enough intensity in the hips, this is where you can stay. Otherwise, if you're looking for more, you can come into full frog. I would suggest come back up into hands and knees position. Bring your shins parallel to each other by moving them away from each other. Maybe you can even bring your knees a little bit farther away from each other. And you're trying to line up your knees with your hips as far as they go here. And now you maybe understand why I have the extra yoga mat and the blanket, so that I have something soft underneath all of these joints that might be really pressing into the floor right now. Like, you can stay up here. So this is essentially frog. You can stay up here on straight arms. You can come down onto forearms. You can maybe make your way all the way down onto the floor. Or again, if you have pillows or bolsters, then make a construction to just lie down here And then we'll stay here for about 3 minutes or so. And if full frog is too intense, but baby frog was okay, move yourself back into baby frog. Baby frog is not a less macho posture, it's just a different one. So that's your frog instead of this frog here. And allow yourself to notice, allow yourself to breathe. I hope you're breathing, I hope you're softening, even though this can be a very intense posture. Breathe into the places that are intense. And give yourself permission to come out of the posture if it over time gets too intense, or find an easier version to get into. Because I'm going to start talking about Mars here for the next couple of minutes that we have residing here in Frog. So the planet Mars is one of the main planets that we know about in our solar system. We know about it because it's one of the closer planets to Earth, which means it's a very bright object in our night sky and has been well known since antiquity. Now, our solar system, the center is our sun, and then 8 major planets revolve around the solar system with many icy Kuiper Belt objects such as Pluto, some icy dwarf planets. But Mars is one of the closer planets to the sun. It's one of 4 very close rocky planets that we call the terrestrial planets, Earth of which is one of them, that are next to the sun. So the closest one to the sun is Mercury. And then the next one from the sun is Venus. And then our home planet, Earth. And then Mars is on the other side of Earth, so farther away from the sun than the Earth. So Mars is, on average, about 145 million miles from the sun. So that's 1.5 times the distance that the Earth is from the sun. So on average, the Earth is only 93 million miles from the sun. So Mars is a little bit farther away than the Earth, but right next door. So it's the planet next over. Venus is on the other side of Earth. And then on the other side of Mars is the asteroid belt, and finally you get up to one of the big gas giant, Jupiter. But since Mars is so close by, it's very distinguishable in the night sky. It's not very big, but it's bright because it's close here. We have about 5 more breaths in frog pose. So reevaluate if you want to stay here any longer. Or if you're deciding it's like, no, this is really getting painful, you give yourself, then slowly come out now. Otherwise, relax, soften your muscles, rediscover your breath, your intention and your attention for practice. So one more breath here. And then slowly bring yourself out. Now, if you're in baby frog, it's probably obvious that you can just sit up and slowly roll yourself out. If you're in full frog, for such a long time, maybe shift your hips forward and then start dragging your extended legs together behind you. Maybe bend your knees. And then slowly do what I call kind of a prone windshield wiper maneuver here, until you work out some of the stagnation from that long hold, and then slowly bring yourself up from here. And now it's time to remind myself that we have the other side of banana pose to do here. So might have to clear your mat of some props. Maybe you like the soft blanket underneath you, so you know what? You could leave it right there if you wanted to. So come back to lying on your back. Legs extended out long. Set yourself up for the other side of banana pose here. So hips are flat. Imagine that you have the imaginary sandbag, or maybe you have a real sandbag that you can place on this right hip. Start inching your legs over to the left side. Again, as far as they go until they're stuck. And then start inching your torso over to the left side. So same side. So again, you're making you're making this crescent moon shape. Decide what you'd like to do with your arms. Again, if you extend your arms out and you feel nerve pinching is not terribly healthy, so you don't want to feel that, so you have to rearrange your arms so you're not feeling that. But if you're just feeling the pressure of pulling on the connective tissue, the structural tissue of the body, that's kind of what we're going for here in Yin. So you can stay there. Head and neck should be in a nice, comfortable position here. If it's not, give yourself permission to rearrange your head and your neck here. And then you can just hang out here on this side of banana for a few more minutes. So all of these inner solar system planets, compared to the big gas giants in the outer solar system, have very rocky cores and then fairly small atmospheres. The atmospheres can be significant, particularly when we're talking about the Earth and Venus, but they're very, very thin compared to the huge atmospheres of, say, Jupiter and Saturn here. And Mars is no exception. So Mars is this little rocky planet, just about 50 million miles farther away from the sun than the Earth is. And it's only about half the diameter of the Earth. What that means is, and it's a little bit lighter than the Earth. So what all that means is Mars only weighs about a tenth what the Earth weighs, and is about only half the diameter of Earth. So one characteristic of Mars is that it's much, much smaller. Much, much smaller place. Still quite bigger than the Moon. It's a lot bigger than the Moon, but smaller than the Earth. That has some consequences, as we're finding out, as we're exploring Mars and discovering more about it. We're realizing that its smaller size, very, very definite property. So Mars has a couple of moons. It has two tiny moons. One is only about 10 miles across. The other one is about 20 miles across. And they're not round. They're odd shaped because you have to be of a certain size to act for gravity to pull yourself into a spherical shape. These two moons. So maybe I should back up and just remind you that Mars is named for the Roman god of war. And in keeping with that theme, when the two tiny moons were discovered, they were named Phobos and Deimos, which is fear and terror, to keep in the tradition of the naming of Mars. This is where I'm going to get into a little bit of this ideology of Yang. So the planet Mars, we as humans in ancient Western civilization, in the Greek and in the Roman civilization, and probably before the Greek civilization, we attributed to this wandering planet the attributes of Yang, naming it after the god of war, which it has been named for since antiquity in Western mythology. And there's some reasons for this. Mars has a very, very distinct orangish color to it because of all the oxidized minerals in its soil. It looks red, looks orangish, it looks like blood. And because it looks like blood, it brings to mind these images of death and destruction, which is probably the main reason why it got attributed to war here. So just a couple more breaths here on this side of banana, and then we're coming out. I should back up and talk a little bit about why planets are called planets. But we'll back up and slowly bring ourselves out of banana pose here. So come back to center. Do whatever you need to do to notice the rebound, the recoil from that posture. Maybe it's giving your knees a nice hug. Maybe it's resting in stillness. Maybe it's doing something a little bit more active to just get that stillness out of your system. When you're ready, slowly bring yourself up to seated. We'll get set up for the next Yin posture. And the next Yin posture is the first asymmetrical posture in another flower. So this is the first side of half saddle. We'll do caterpillar, and then the other side of half saddle. So I'll do half saddle in stages. And again, if you have some pillows, or I'm going to cheat here and grab my handy dandy bolster. This can be pillows, this can be blankets that you pile up. Going to start seated, legs out in front for half saddle. Bring your padding up against the back side of your hips. And then for half saddle, bend the right knee and bring the right shin and right heel on the outside of the right hip. This knee can float, it can be out wide, it just can't hurt. So if you're doing this, and this knee is starting to protest, remember, pain doesn't do you any good, it just injures you. So if it's sharp biting pain, that's maybe not a good idea. There'll be an alternative will be Sphinx. If you're okay to go this far, you can stay here. Or the next stage is start to lower yourself back. Now you can hang out on your arms if you only go back a little bit away before you're feeling enough. Some people can make it all the way back onto a pile of cushions. In this case, we got this bolster here. Or you can maybe go all the way back to the floor. You're moving by sensation, so you're stopping before you're experiencing pain. This knee, by the way, it can float around. You can put stuff underneath that knee to stabilize it, or maybe it just rests on the floor. So this is half saddle. This might be too much for this thigh, that knee, or this ankle. This is a back bend, particularly if you're using a pile of padding to rest on. There's a little bit of curve in my low back, in my lumbar, my sacrum. Because of that, if you're not wanting to do saddle, then you can always do Sphinx, which is a different kind of a back bend. And I'll just demonstrate Sphinx here quickly. Sphinx is where you come onto your belly, legs are comfortably extended out beside you, elbows are underneath your shoulders, shoulder width apart, and then you relax your torso to create a small back bend and some compression in your low back here, not painful. So maybe you have to go a little bit forward here with your arms, or maybe you have to put blocks underneath your elbows to move yourself into a position where you feel something. Head can be up, head can be down, head can be resting on a block. This is Sphinx. And that's a nice alternative when saddle just isn't, half saddle isn't working for you. Oh, by the way, for those of you who like full saddle, you can always do 2 rounds of full saddle if you want to do full saddle rather than half saddle. For some people, we find this mildly easier to just do 1 saddle leg at a time here. And we'll stay here for a couple more minutes on this side. So back in ancient times, before there was much science development, all the ancients knew were there were these lights in the sky that they called stars. And the stars seemed fixed to each other. And they moved once per day, all the stars, because the ancients didn't know about the rotation of the earth. They thought the stars were moving. And they saw all the stars moving around the sky once a day here. And most of the stars, though, were fixed in their position with respect to each other, except for a few exceptions. The sun, the moon, those are obvious. And then there are other stars out there that didn't pay attention to the other stars that were fixed with each other. They moved. They were wandering. And indeed, the word planet is Greek for wanderer. It wasn't fixed like the other stars. It actually moved along this kind of road here. And that's where planets got their names. And they saw Jupiter, Venus, Mars as these wandering stars. Mars got attributed to the god of war not only because it looked red, looked like blood, but the ancients thought Mars was a star that was like attacking and charging the other stars because it would move close to other stars and then move away as if it was kind of attacking them. That's another reason why it got attributed to war and to aggression, is because it was red and it would take on these other stars here. So a little less than a minute here on this side of saddle, or Sphinx if you're practicing Sphinx here. Or maybe you need to come out. 2 minutes is a goodly long hold for this side. Venus was this brilliant star that they saw in the mornings and the evenings, and of course it was so bright, Venus being a little bit closer to Earth, a little bit bigger, even brighter than Venus, brighter than Mars, and so it got labeled Venus, the goddess of love, whereas Mars got labeled the god of war. Jupiter was the head god in case of the Roman mythology here. And so over the eons, since Mars was war, Mars got, by the way, the Greek name for Mars is Ares. And there's actually a star, there's a red supergiant in the southern sky called Antares, which is about as bright and about as orange as Mars is. And it's literally, the star's name Antares means not Mars, so that people wouldn't confuse the star with the wandering star Mars here. So maybe one more breath on this side of half saddle, and then the easiest way to get out of half saddle is to roll away from the bent leg. So if the right leg is bent, then roll slowly to the left until you can actually release that right leg. And then a good exercise here is to slowly check out that right leg and make sure it still works. Check out each joint. So maybe roll the ankle and then flex the knee a few times, and then maybe roll the hip joint, just to get some blood back into that leg. When you know that leg is still on speaking terms with you, slowly bring yourself up to seated. And before we do the other side, we'll do caterpillar next for the yin posture, but maybe we'd like to do a little bit of neutralization here first. So let's try a twist with legs extended out front. Bend the left knee, put the left foot on the outside of the right knee. Clasp the left knee with your hands, grow your spine nice and tall, and then begin to twist gently to the left side. You can hug the left knee with the right hand. And then just stay here for maybe 1 or 2 breaths. Bring yourself back to center. We'll do the other side, so legs go out straight. Bend the right knee, bring the right foot on the outside of the left knee. Hug the right knee with your hands, grow up tall. And then gentle twist over to the right side here. And just a breath too. This is just a counter pose to neutralize the spine after that back bend. So we're coming into a forward bend now. So come forward, and next posture is caterpillar. And for caterpillar, it is just a seated forward fold. Legs straight out in front. Now if you have a lot of tightness in your back body, set up on some height. You can sit up on a blanket, or you can sit up on a block. I'm going to use my handy dandy bolster here again. I'm just going to sit up on this bolster, legs extended out front. Again, if there's a lot of strain in the back bottoms of the legs, the knees can be soft, and that's secret yoga code for bent. Grow up tall through your torso initially, and then just fold forward. Again, this is a pose we'll be in for a few minutes here. Just as far as you go. And if you don't go any far, let your spine round here. Let your neck and head just hang. That's not feeling good. If you're needing some support, then gather support here. Maybe you need something underneath your knees here. So you can really start grabbing things to help with support. It's also okay. Some of us can do this without any props. Some of us can just hang in midair. And so that's okay to do too. The idea is to find a supported position where you can stay and allow yourself to soften and allow yourself to breathe. I kind of like to run my hand up against my legs. My hips want to externally rotate, and so to kind of keep them straight, just so I get more pressure in the backs of my legs, which is what I'm trying to do here. I kind of keep work my hands and my arms on either side, and then I'll just stay here for a few more minutes here. So in ancient times, the ancients just saw Mars as this orange wandering star that seemed to challenge other stars. Ergo, it had very yang qualities to it. Qualities attributed to battle, to the warrior, to war, to violence, to aggression. And that's how we named Mars. That's how we named the moons of Mars, fear and terror here. Although the moons themselves might not really have been moons, they might have just been captured asteroids that Mars captured. Although there is evidence that they may indeed be leftovers from the formation of Mars. The jury is still out. Scientifically, we're still not sure if they were just happenstance asteroids that Mars captured in its gravity, or if they really were some sort of leftovers from the formation of Mars here. So maybe about one more minute here in caterpillar, if that's okay. By the way, if caterpillar is just too strainful on the legs, you can always come into a modified form known as butterfly. And that is to bend your knees, allow them to lower out to each side, and then come back into the forward fold where the spine and the torso is relaxed. I call this metamorphing into a butterfly if you're quite done with caterpillar. Otherwise, if you're sticking it out here in caterpillar, about 5 more long, slow breaths here in caterpillar or so. And so that's what we knew about Mars. Mars was this little red wandering planet. But we're getting very interested in studying Mars. Very interested for a few reasons. First of all, Mars is close. Mars is within our grasp. Technology-wise, it's very easy for us to send probes to Mars because it is a planet that's fairly close to us. So that's important. That's important. But what we're also finding out is that Mars might have had the basic ingredients to sustain life. In fact, this seems to be the case the more and more we study Mars. So we're done with half caterpillar. When you're ready, go ahead and slowly bring your torso back up. This can be slowly, and this can be with your arms for help to bring yourself up into a nice neutral position. And then from here, you might want to do some sort of light yang activity. Maybe I'll suggest reverse table. So bend your knees, put your feet on the floor about hip width apart, hands behind your torso, and then root through your hands and your feet. Engage the muscles in your arms and your shoulders, and then try to lift your hips off the floor. You know, they don't have to go very far. You're just going as far as they can go, and then slowly lower them back down here. And then we'll set up for the other side have the other side of half saddle to do. So decide how you would like to set up. And if you did a round of Sphinx, maybe do another round of Sphinx. Or you can try half saddle on this side. Maybe you have an issue with a knee or an ankle on one leg. It just means you can't do it on that side. Now you'll be a little bit unbalanced just doing one side of asymmetrical posture, but maybe that's okay. You'll have to figure that out yourself. So this time it's the left knee that bends. Bring the left heel on the outside of the left hip. And if that's already giving you problems, maybe Sphinx here. Don't worry about the angle of the foot or the ankle. Just to me needs to be, put it in the angle that's most accessible to you. And then either stay here seated. This is perfectly good half saddle pose. Maybe lean back a little bit. Or make your way all the way down onto the floor or onto a pile of cushions here. And then we resolve to stay here for a while. So Mars was named the god of war because it was red and kind of antagonized other stars. Venus, the planet Venus, was named for the goddess of love because it was so brilliantly beautiful in the evenings and the morning skies here. But as we send more probes to Mars, as we begin to study it in detail, as our interest for this planet grows, we begin to realize that besides Earth, of all the planets in the solar system, Mars really does, or at least did, have the ingredients to harbor life. As we send more and more probes, as we send rovers to Mars to sample the surface, what we're realizing is in the early days of Mars's formation, it had many of the same properties that early Earth had. In fact, Mars and Earth were very similar in many respects, 400 billion, or not 3 to 4 billion years ago. Just a billion years after the formation of the solar system. These two planets were kind of undergoing identical evolutions here, to the point where Mars may have had oceans of water, may have had rushing water, may have had a more significant atmosphere. By the way, Mars has about 1% of the atmosphere that Earth does, and it's almost all carbon dioxide. So Martian atmosphere, 95% carbon dioxide, whereas Earth is mainly nitrogen and oxygen, a little bit of carbon dioxide, a bunch of other stuff in the atmosphere. By the way, the oxygen is completely due to life producing oxygen on Earth. If there was no life on Earth, there would be no oxygen in the atmosphere. It's all put there by life. But Mars hasn't had any life, at least not for a few million years. And any oxygen that might have been in the atmosphere either settled into the minerals, which is why it's reddish in color, or escaped into the atmosphere. The only thing is left is this carbon dioxide. There is, however, a lot of water, and it's right below the surface. It's all frozen because Mars is cold now. And since Mars doesn't have much of an atmosphere, it can't retain heat. And so it's gotten quite cool in the last few million years. We have a couple more breaths here on this side. But it did. We're finding out that in the past it did have water. It did have a more substantial atmosphere. It had all the ingredients to nurture and sustain life. Now, whether life developed there, we don't know yet. We're still trying to figure that one out there. Some things happened that made it a little bit more hostile to life. Mars is a lot more colder. Mars has very little atmosphere these days. Mars's water is all frozen out here. But we're ready to come out of half saddle. So when you're ready to come out, if you haven't already come out of it, again, easiest way is to slowly roll away from that bent leg. And you know which one is bent because you're feeling it. And then you can slowly unfurl that bent leg and start doing a systems test to make sure that leg still works. And when you realize it's still working, you can go ahead and bring yourself all the way up. Any kind of little movement to work out the kinks here. So can be a back bend for the lower back. Next in posture is a back bend for the upper back. And I just simply call this heart opening on a blanket roll. So if you have some sort of blanket, fold it into a square roughly this shape. And then from there, roll it up into a burrito shape. Nice, stable burrito. This, we're going to lie back on it and place it underneath our shoulder blades. So place it on the floor and then lie back on the floor with the blanket burrito right in the middle of your upper back. So roughly speaking, that's somewhere underneath your shoulder blades, kind of where I have it. So notice I don't have it underneath my neck. And I don't have it so low that it's underneath my lumbar spine here. I have it to reverse the pressure on that primary curve in my upper back here. And then from here, arms extend, the legs can be soft here. You can release your head and your neck back. If this is okay for you, for your head and your neck, you can stay right here. That's too much. If that's too dramatic for your head and your neck, then by all means put some support, grab a pillow, and place that under your head and your neck so it's not so extreme. What's important here is trying to create the pressure here. By the way, if this blanket is not enough pressure, you can put a few books underneath your shoulder blades, or you can put a yoga block underneath your shoulder blades, or maybe even a bolster. So you can play around with whatever you have at home here. And then we'll stay here. We'll stay here for a few more minutes in this upper back, this heart opener here. So you're almost in a shavasana, in a resting pose position. So legs are soft, hands are soft. By the way, you can do different leg positions if you want to. You can have feet out wide and knees together, or you can come into butterfly legs too. Those kinds of options are always open for you. So the ironic thing about Mars is even though we've kind of labeled Mars as this very aggressive, yang place because of its mythological name, the god of war. Mars might be the best bet in the solar system, other than Earth itself, of a place that could have harbored life. It had the right ingredients. It had the nurturing qualities, the more we study it with science. And so it was a nurturing place. It had the principles of the divine feminine, as you might say, in that it was a cradle. It could have been a cradle for life. And so what might have been a more appropriate name for it is we kind of misnamed Mars. We should have named Mars Venus. Venus, the goddess of love, because it had the cradle, the nurturing cradles to rare life, loving nature. Venus, on the other hand, has all kinds of nasty characteristics that make it hostile to life. So Venus would have been much better named Mars, the god of war. So, but back in the ancient times, ancient people just saw them as wandering stars. They had no idea what kind of attributes the actual planets actually had. And so now that we know, we could have renamed Mars. We could have renamed it after a goddess of love, after a goddess of nurturing, because of all the ingredients, all the conditions one needs to sustain life that we're slowly discovering there. Maybe they're not there anymore. Maybe it is kind of a dusty, deserted, desert, cold planet. In the past, it was very similar to our own Garden of Eden, right here on Earth. So maybe 3 more breaths here. And then when you're ready to come out, maybe reach back with your hands and brace your head and your neck to lift your head and your neck up, so that you can figure out now how to roll off your blanket roll. You can either sit up or roll over gently to one side, and then sit up here. And then remove the blanket roll. Maybe remove any other props that you have. Before a final resting pose, maybe one more integrative twist. So bring yourself back down on to the ground. Bend your knees, bring your knees into your chest, maybe give your knees a hug here. And then arms come out to the side, either T position or cactus arms. And gently lower both knees over to the right side. And the left shoulder is trying to ooze back towards the ground so that you do feel like you're in a twist here. Head can stay neutral, or you can experiment with turning your head to the left. Just a breath here. And then slowly bring yourself back to neutral. And then when you're ready, knees go to the left. Right shoulder kind of oozes back to the floor. Maybe head turns to the right. Just a breath here or so. And then bring your knees back up to center. Maybe give them one final hug. We're moving into our resting pose, Savasana. If there's any final movement or wiggling that you would like to do, go ahead and do that for a while. And then bring yourself into your resting position. It can be a traditional Shavasana. It can be legs up the wall, your favorite restorative posture. Today, this practice I'm going to suggest just sitting quietly in a meditative position here. So you can sit cross-legged, you can sit back on your heels. Just a nice quiet seat to just check in with your breath. And maybe one final check and walk through of your body here. So as you begin to settle, notice where you're rooted. Those are the contact points between your body and the floor. Begin to notice where there's still muscular tension and engagement. See if that can soften. Shoulders are soft. Face is soft. Release your jaw. Soften your tongue. Soften all the parts inside your mouth, your teeth and your gums. Soften your lips, the skin around your mouth, your nose, your chin. Soften the skin around each ear and soften your eye sockets. Muscles around your left eye, muscles around your right eye socket. That very space in between your eye, the third eye. See if there's tension there and see if it can be released. Soften your temples, your forehead, very crown of your head. Relax your thoughts. Notice them. Oh, they'll still be generating themselves. They'll be coming in, they'll be going out. See if you can release them and let them leave by postponing the judgment and the criticism of those thoughts. Didn't just be thoughts, part of your experience, your sensation. And continue to notice the gentle inhales and the exhales of your breath. Soften your shoulders, your right arm, your right palm, your right fingers. Left arm, left palm, and left fingers. See if you can notice tingling in the tips of each of your fingers. Both of your hands, left hand fingers, right hand fingers. Can be subtle. Soften your torso. Relax your rib cage, your abdomen. Soften your hips, your upper legs, your thighs, your knees, your lower legs, your shins, your calves. Release your ankles, heels, soles and tops of your feet. Release and relax all of your toes on both feet. All the toes on your left foot, all the toes on your right foot. See if you can notice the very tips of each toe. And notice a light sense of energy. Release, relax, and surrender your body-mind 100%. At some point, bring yourself gently back. You can begin to deepen your breath and then begin to make little motions. Maybe start with the tips of your fingers, expand into your hands, into your wrists, maybe expand your toes and your feet. And then at some point, maybe begin to move around your whole body. So arms, legs, torso, maybe head and neck gently rock back and forth. If you're lying down on the ground, more traditional Shavasana, maybe gently bend your knees. Roll over onto one side. When you get there, stay there for a moment and give yourself a nice deep thank you for your practice and your efforts today. But also a nice deep thank you for you, your unique embodiment in the universe. Just like Mars, the universe is ecstatically joyful that you are here. And then when you're ready, bring yourself up into a comfortable seat, if you're not already there. Find some rootedness, reconnect with your inner ground. Bring your hands together at heart center. I'll end practice with an Om. You can either listen or join in. The inner light in me honors the inner light in you. Namaste.